What is going on, everybody? My name is Kneeckoh, and welcome back to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet VGC video. We need to talk about Regulation C and the Ruin Pokemon coming into play. So, I finally have a day off work, and I can actually talk about this. It got announced my first day back, and then I was working, so I haven't had time to get a video up on this. But Series 3, or as it's now being called, Regulation C, which they changed the naming because of the fact that they do the seasons and everybody was getting confused whether it was Season 5 or Series 5. It was a whole thing. So now it's Regulations. It'll still be Series 3 in the title because it just fits better. Less characters, you know? But we are getting access to Wo-Chien, Chien-Pao, Ting-Lu, and Chi-Yu all in play right now. Oddly enough, the Paradox Pokemon that were added, Walking Wake and Iron Leaves, are still banned. You're not allowed to use them currently. But this is definitely going to be an interesting shakeup in the metagame. So if this is your first time here on the channel, make sure you are subbed for more videos like this in the future. I post daily competitive Pokemon content, but let's get into it. So these Pokemon are super interesting. If you're unaware, their abilities actually lower the base stat of the Pokemon that you're going up against. For example, active Pokemon against Chien-Pao will have their defense multiplied by 0.75. Chi-Yu, their special defense. Wo-Chien, their attack. And Ting-Lu, the special attack. So these are kind of your bulky guys that want to like save everybody. These are your more offensive guys. And honestly, for me personally, I think that the attack and special attack drops are way more significant than what these two can do. And that's just kind of a personal preference thing and the stuff I've been testing already. I think these two are still good, but I just think that these two are really, really solid, especially Ting-Lu. I think Ting-Lu is actually really good. It walls both of these pretty well and handles both of them pretty well as even deals with Wo-Chien pretty well. Wo-Chien's just kind of a pain because of how bulky it is, and it's mainly a stall user. But the other two are handled very, very well by this particular Pokemon, which I find very interesting. Now, I want to talk about each one individually here in this video, and eventually I'll get around to making a separate moveset guide for each of these Pokemon, talking about their strengths, their weaknesses, you know, the whole 9 yards, like the Dragonite video I put up the other day. But I think that these Pokemon are all going to be really good. These are the only 4 that are actually shaking up the metagame, but their abilities make it so interesting, and this is really going to come down to a situation of board control. Their abilities really make you focus on what Pokemon are on the field and what their abilities are actually doing. Now, one thing to note with these abilities, and something that I wanted to find out before I made this video, was Clear Amulet does not save your Pokemon from these. So it's not like Intimidate where you see like the little status effect. These are just applied automatically upon entering a battle. So your Clear Amulet will not save you from these abilities, which is a touch unfortunate. It's something I was really hoping for, because like adding like a Clear Amulet to a Great Tusk and throwing it in front of a lot of these, you're in a really good position. But now with knowing that, it is a touch difficult for certain Pokemon to continue thriving in the format. So let's start with Chien-Pao. I think this guy's interesting, to say the least. I think he's okay. I think a lot of people are gonna like focus on this kind of set here. I highly recommend Sacred Sword on this Pokemon, because if you just rely on your ice type stuff, you're gonna get walled pretty hard by a lot of these Pokemon. But this is the same speed as Fluttermane, so you want to match the Fluttermane speed tie ideally. The only time Fluttermane's going to outspeed you is if it has booster energy or if Tailwind's up, right? So I think what's really solid here is you could go with like Sacred Sword, or maybe throw on like Ice Spinner to deal with like any sort of terrain or something that gets in your way. Throat Chop's an option. You can go with Throat Chop or something to that effect. It does also get access to Icy Wind. You could use this as like a bundle alternative, which I think is a really cool idea, because you get the defense drop for the opposition, and then you're also able to do bundle things, which is, you know, Icy Wind stuff, which I think is really, really cool. But it does also get access to Taunt, which I think could be very valuable going into a lot of different Trick Room setups and things like that. But also Throat Chop is a valid option for this Pokemon, which I think is really, really good. The fact that there are 4 new Dark types being added means that Psy Spam is going to be heavily affected. I think Gothitelle use drops. I think Goldango drops a little bit, because Goldango doesn't like playing into really any of these guys. It just doesn't handle them very well. It's outsped by these two specifically, which are going to be able to just Oko it, and then these two are able to eat the hits from it, right? So I think Goldango's going to have a really hard time come Series 3. The best Terra typing for this guy, I'm gonna go with Fire. I think that's just the best. It makes you immune to like flutter mains that are going to be an issue for you and things like that. I think Fire is just a really good option. Now there are some other spreads that you could consider using. Maybe if you wanted to make this thing a little more bulky, you could, but I think honestly like something like this for the focus sash set is going to be like a really solid option for you. I think that the best Pokemon, because like this series doesn't change dramatically from series 2, like a lot of Pokemon are still going to be incredibly solid. Palafin being the prime example of this. Palafin has won the last 3 tournaments, and I think it's still just going to be incredibly strong. But pair this with a Chien-Pao that's lowering the defense, and put this in the rain with a Terra Water, and your Jet Punches and Wave Crashes are just going to be flying, just going crazy. And another interesting thing is if you're running this with a Palafin, is this Pokemon actually does get access to Haze. So you can make this like a little support Pokemon, essentially, and be able to go in with like Haze and handle like Dondozos and stuff. And then you could go in with like, instead of having to run Haze on Palafin, which a lot of people were doing with like Mystic Water, you can actually go in and maybe Life Orb Palafin, or do something to that effect. You can still run Mystic Water, it'd be fine. But you could throw Close Combat on Palafin, which I think is a really, really good option, right? Especially considering this is a 120 base attack, and you do have Sacred Sword, but this is a 160 base attack, and you're going to be able to go in with Close Combat to just wreck stuff. So I think this is a really, really good option to be able to have as a partner Pokemon for Palafin specifically. Next up, we have Chi-Yu, and I think Chi-Yu is really, really good as well. Similar speed stat, it's only a base 100 speed, so it's not as fast as things like Fluttermane, but it does have pretty good special defense, as you can see here. You're going to run a similar set to what you would with something like Fluttermane. In terms of the Terra type, just off the bat, I think that Fire is a valid option if you want to do big damage and just kind of go crazy. But I think the best is probably Grass. Grass is just really, really solid for this particular Pokemon. I think it's a very, very valid option. You don't have to use safety goggles then. You don't have to worry about Amoonguss issues. And then something to the effect of like Heat Wave, Dark Pulse. It does get access to Nasty Plot, so you could like be like a little Fire Goldango, which would be kind of cool. And then you could run Protect, maybe if I could spell Protect. But something like this, and you can give it like Life Orb or something. This gets really, really strong really fast, especially when you think about stuff that you could run alongside it. Like Mousehold and Goldango is really cool right now, but like this Pokemon, the issue that I have, like a lot of people are going to opt for like Fluttermane as this partner. I think if you do this, you almost are reliant on running Booster Energy Fluttermane for this. And the reason I say this is because if you don't, you're gonna have some serious issues because you're lowering one of your only good defensive stats on this Pokemon. By sitting it next to Chi-Yu. Like, you have a very serious issue, and I believe if there's still a prevalence of booster energy bundles running around, you are getting outspeed by them, and I'm pretty positive that after you get Icy Winded by a booster energy bundle, you're actually slower than the opposing Fluttermane. If I'm not mistaken, I haven't run that calc in a while, but I'm pretty positive of that if you get Icy Winded, you lose your, you get a -1 speed drop on Fluttermane with a booster energy, you're actually slower than like a normal timid max speed Fluttermane, which could be very problematic for you. So just something to note there. Like, I think Chi-Yu and Fluttermane is going to be something that we see a lot, but it's just something that is kind of like, it's a give and take because you're hurting your own Fluttermane by having it next to Chi-Yu. And not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, because Fluttermane getting that extra damage is going to be absolutely crazy. I mean, you could even opt for a Focus Sash to do big damage. I think Focus Sash is one of the better items on Fluttermane right now, especially now that Chi-Yu's back. Like, a lot of people were opting for Life Orb on it, but like with Chi-Yu being back, you get that bonus without having to like sacrifice health, and having Focus Sash could be very beneficial for you. Wo-Chien's really, really fun. It's really fun. I think it's just a really cool Pokemon. For one, you know, you're super bulky. Both defenses are pretty great. Your special attack's not terrible. Like, it's not a bad special attack, but it's not one that you can actually do a whole lot with. So truthfully, I think managing your defenses is actually going to be like the main thing with this Pokemon, and just being able to handle stuff. Like, you don't even have to do as much defense investment because Tablets of Ruin is actually lowering the attack of the opposing Pokemon, so you don't have to worry as much about taking big hits. You can just focus on your special defense, as your like main priority for this Pokemon, which I think is really nice. And then you could even go into something like, what do we want? We want something like that could be good. And then like this Pokemon just has so many good support moves. Like Pollen Puff's really crazy because you can then pretty much just like calc defenses against opposition, and Pokemon that should be going down really easily are surviving hits, and you can just Pollen Puff them back next turn, right? So that's really, really beneficial with this Pokemon. It also gets Leech Seed, which allows you to stall very well. With like Leech Seed and Leftovers, you're able to just get a bunch of health back and really kind of sit on this Pokemon. It does also get access to Knockoff, which is crazy. Very nice as well. And then like Protect. There are other options. Like this thing does also get access to like Snarl, which is super cool. It gets access to Screens, which I don't think is as good on this Pokemon. But it does have them, which I think is interesting. In terms of Terras, I like Poison. Poison I think is a really solid one. It does make you weak to Ting-Lu, which is something you need to be aware of. Poison or something like Fairy would be very good. Poison's good because you block out the fighting type weakness and things of that nature, but I think that Fairy is just super solid because it doesn't leave you weak to another super powerful threat right now in the format. Now, things that are going to be really solid next to this are going to be like Intimidators, right? Because like if you throw Arcanine next to this with Intimidate, and then Wo-Chien uses Tablets of Ruin, plus you use Intimidate with Arcanine, like their whole side of the field is nuked in terms of damage, right? So they're not going to be able to do a whole lot with Wo-Chien sitting there, which I think is something that's really, really cool about this Pokemon. Finally, we get to Ting-Lu. Ting-Lu is actually going to be kind of crazy. And the reason I say that, why is it not just maxing? Okay, the reason I say that is because it's just bulky. Now, you might look at that special defense stat and be like, oh, well, 80's not that great. Sure, but this thing negates special attack. It lowers special attack by 25%, and then you could throw an Assault Vest on this thing, and it's just a menace. Like, nothing's going to one-shot it, right? So, in terms of movesets, there's a handful of options that you can run. Earthquake is a valid option. You can go in and Earthquake and kind of do like Great Tusk things, but this thing is so much slower than Great Tusk that putting this next to like a Talonflame or something seems kind of like, why? So I think what is really good for this Pokemon actually is just going in with Stomping Tantrum. And then Body Press is not bad on this thing. If you consider the fact that, you know, there are 3 other dark types that you have to deal with in the metagame, that's really good, especially because your defensive stats pretty high, right? So Body Press is really solid. Heavy Slam is available here, and that allows you to play into Fluttermane super well, especially because this Pokemon's very heavy. So you're able to play into Fluttermanes pretty effectively with that. And then in terms of your final move, like this also gets access to Snarl, which could be really good. But you do also just get Throat Chop, which is kind of crazy. And like realistically, a lot of the Pokemon that you're going to be playing into, if you think about like Psy Spam loses to this every time. Psy Spam hates this. So that's one thing. But like just throwing Throat Chop on this thing is going to make it a menace to Psy Spam. Like Psy Spam does literally nothing to this. Like what are they going to Armor Cannon you? You eat that up. They can't Psy Spam you. The most is if their DD has Dazzling Gleam, and you're still going to eat that very well. Now in terms of Terra typing for this, I think Fire is good. Because you can like avoid burns and stuff from Arcanine, which is kind of important for this Pokemon. But the other thing to note is like you just get whopped by Palafin by this, right? So I think the solid option is Poison. Poison could be really good for this particular Pokemon, because then you're like you remove your fighting type weakness. You remove your Fairy type weakness, and then you're just kind of like sitting and taking neutral damage from Palafins and things like that, because Palafin I still think is going to be incredibly solid throughout the continuation of Series 3. So this is like a really solid option for this Pokemon. Now in terms of partners for this guy, I think it's going to be kind of tricky because you don't want to like lower your own Fluttermane and things like that effect. So it's got to be something that, you know, is just handling the situation very well. So you know, you could put this next to like Iron Hands would be really good. Iron Hands specifically because if you're running Assault Vest on this and maybe you wanted to run like a Berry or something on this Iron Hands, the thing to note is that, you know, everything has lower special attacks. So, you know, Iron Hands, which normally doesn't like getting hit by special attacks, doesn't have to worry about it as much because you're lowering that. So it's something to consider for sure, especially if you're running like a Berry on this and AV on Iron Hands. That would be something that you could do. That's really solid as well. Allows Iron Hands to kind of eat But honestly, of like all the Pokemon that we've talked about in this video, I think the Ting-Lu just kind of feels like Iron Hands in the sense that it's like a glue Pokemon. Like it can really fit onto a bunch of different teams because of just the nature of how it plays. And I think it plays really well into like Chi-Yu Fluttermane that we talked about earlier. Like you can throw it out in front of them and Terra it, and like what do they do to you? What do they do? Nothing, right? So I think that's a really solid option as well, especially if you're running Terra Fire on this. Like you just throw it out in front of those two Pokemon and they're just like sitting there waiting to get whopped. So I think that this is just the most solid all-around Pokemon. It reminds me a lot of Iron Hands in terms of its speed. Like if I bring up Iron Hands again, like obviously you lose like fake out pressure and stuff, but like looking at the two stats, like 5 points lower in speed, but you get more health on Ting-Lu. Let's look here. Defense, you get more defense. Your attack's a little bit lower, but that's okay. You get more special defense. Like this is a very similar Pokemon. Obviously different typing, but like I feel like this could be one of those glue Pokemon that just kind of fits onto teams and does work and just super annoying to deal with. So that is going to be it for this video. I just briefly wanted to talk about some of these Pokemon and why I thought each one was good individually. Like I said, I'll probably have an updated moveset guide. This is only like day 3 of it being live on Showdown for us to test, so we'll see more use kind of pop up along the way. I think it's going to be really interesting when we get to tournament formats, because I just think like Wo-Chien and Ting-Lu are going to pop up a lot more than people think because of how useful they are in terms of, like, if you consider the fact that they're, like, you're taking 25%, well, they're lowering the damage by 25%. You're only taking 3/4. Like, it's like a friend guard on Mousehold, right? To a specific typing, of course. Mousehold covers everything, but these guys cover a specific type, which is really, really beneficial. So I think that's something that's really cool to consider. And the nice thing is with Ting-Lu, like if you did run a Ting-Lu and you ran an Arcanine next to it, now you have coverage for both, right? Now you have coverage for both and you have friend guard. Like, it's crazy. So those are my thoughts. I think these are really cool. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But if you enjoyed the video, found it entertaining, helpful, leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Also, be sure to check out Discord where people over there hanging out, playing Pokemon all the time. And if you want to see more from me, check out this video where I talk about Dragonite in Series 2 and why it is so good. Also, check out this video where I used a Go-Goat team on the ladder. It was crazy. Honestly, Go-Goat is something that you never see, and it was super fun to play a team like this. And it also had some really cool other stuff like Iron Treads and Lumineon. So definitely a cool team, and I recommend checking it out. But until next time, peace.